Hi everyone, I'm Sir Errol, and today I will be walking you through a topic that powers everything from your lab test to your own heartbeat. Have you ever wondered where your body gets the energy to do everything, like walking to school, focusing on a test, or performing lab procedures like pipetting or centrifuging samples? There's one molecule behind it all: ATP. ATP is like the power bank of your cells, fueling nearly every function in your body and in the lab. Before we go deeper, let's warm up. Can anyone recall what a nucleotide is and where you've encountered it in biochem so far? Alright, that's correct. It's a nitrogenous base plus sugar plus phosphate. That foundation will help you understand ATP better today. In our objectives for today's lessons, students will explain how the structure of ATP makes it an effective energy carrier in the cells. Students will also compare the three main ways cells produce ATP and describe when each process happens. Lastly, students will be able to give examples of how ATP is used in different cellular activities and explain why it is called the energy currency of the cell. In this short session, we will look at what ATP is made of, how your body makes it, and why it is called the energy currency of life. I'll also guide you in connecting its structure to its function so you can understand why ATP is essential to what we do as future medtech professionals. So, ATP is a nucleotide, meaning it consists of an adenine base, a ribose sugar, and three phosphate groups. As you can see here in our figure, the base, sugar, and three phosphate groups are attached together. It serves as a primary carrier of energy in all living cells, because it stores and transfers energy that organisms need for various biological processes. Learning checkpoint: can you please name the three components of an ATP molecule? Correct. An adenine base, a ribose sugar, and three phosphate groups. Okay, now, moving on, let's further discuss its structure. Its chemical bonds contain two high-energy phosphoanhydride bonds, which as seen here is attached to the three phosphate groups. This means that when these bonds are broken down, energy is released. When it undergoes hydrolysis, or the breaking down of molecules using water, it breaks down to ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, thus separating one phosphate group, or what we call an inorganic phosphate plus, as I stated earlier, energy. Before we continue, a quick question for you guys. What products are formed when ATP is hydrolyzed? Alright, correct. It results in adenosine diphosphate, an inorganic phosphate, and energy. We've already talked about the structure, but how is ATP synthesized? Well, as stated earlier, during the hydrolysis of ATP, it breaks down into ADP, an inorganic phosphate, and energy. This same ADP and inorganic phosphate are used to synthesize ATP and are regenerated through three main mechanisms. First, let's discuss about substrate level phosphorylation. This is the simplest way to make ATP. It happens when a high energy substrate directly transfers its phosphate group to ADP. When we say high energy substrate, it stores enough energy in its chemical bonds to transfer a phosphate group to ADP and make ATP. An example is the phosphoenol pyruvate found in glycolysis. This process is anaerobic, meaning it doesn't need oxygen, and it doesn't rely on a membrane or a gradient. You'll see substrate level phosphorylation at work during glycolysis in the cytoplasm and also in the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria. Although it only produces small amounts of ATP compared to other mechanisms, it's fast and crucial, especially when oxygen is limited. Okay, quick question. Does substrate level phosphorylation occur in an oxygen-rich environment or in an oxygen-free environment? Correct. It occurs in an oxygen-free environment as this process is anaerobic. Moving on, we have another mechanism called the oxidative phosphorylation. This process takes place in the mitochondria and makes most of the ATP during aerobic respiration. It all starts with the electron transfer chain, or ATC, in the inner mitochondrial membrane. Here, high energy electrons are passed along a series of proteins, releasing energy that pumps protons across the membrane and builds up a proton gradient. This gradient stores potential energy like water behind a dam. Oxygen is essential here. It serves as the main electron acceptor, combining with electrons and protons to form water. Finally, the protons flow back through an enzyme called ATP synthase, a process called chemiosmosis, which uses stored energy of the gradient to power the production of ATP. This mechanism is highly efficient and produces the majority of the cell's ATP. Okay guys, quick question. Where in the cell does oxidative phosphorylation take place? Alright, correct. It takes place in the mitochondria of the cells. Lastly, let's talk about photophosphorylation. This mechanism happens in plants and some bacteria during photosynthesis, where light energy is used to make ATP. In the thylakoid membranes of chloroplasts, light energy absorbed by chlorophyll excites electrons, which then flow through an electron transport chain, just like in mitochondria. The energy release pumps protons across the membrane, creating a proton gradient. As the protons flow back through ATP synthase, ATP is produced through chemiosmosis. This ATP, along with NADPH, is then used in the Calvin cycle to build sugars. Checkpoint. Another question for the class. What source of energy is utilized in photophosphorylation? Correct. Photophosphorylation utilizes light energy to produce ATP. Now, can you recall the three mechanisms of ATP synthesis? Okay, correct. Substrate level phosphorylation, oxidative phosphorylation, and photophosphorylation. Alright, so now that we've seen what ATP looks like and how it's synthesized, what does it actually do? Well, honestly, pretty much everything your cell needs to stay alive and do their job. Let's start with energy. ATP's most famous job. ATP is like your body's rechargeable battery, always on standby, to power what needs to get done. Whether you're moving a muscle, pumping ions, or pushing molecules across membranes. ATP provides the fuel. It does this by giving up one of its phosphate groups, which releases energy. That energy powers essential tasks like muscle contraction and active transport in cells. Alright class, learning checkpoint. Identify ATP's role in active transport and muscle contraction. Anybody? Alright, correct. It gives up one of its phosphate groups to produce the energy needed to fuel the active transport and muscle contraction. Next up is building. ATP helps your cells make stuff. Making proteins, ATP's got a hand in that too. It helps attach amino acids to tRNA, basically prepping the cell's assembly line for protein synthesis. It also supplies energy for building DNA, RNA, and lipids. Think of ATP as a construction fund that keeps every molecular project going inside your body. Quick question for the class. Explain how ATP contributes to protein synthesis. Correct. It aids in the attachment of amino acids, the building blocks of protein, to tRNA. Another function of ATP is outside the cell. ATP acts as a signaling molecule, helping coordinate things like nerve impulses and immune responses. Inside the cell, ATP turns on key enzymes, especially kinases, which help regulate other proteins. So ATP isn't just powering reactions, it's also directing traffic, telling the cell when and where to act. Question for everybody. Does ATP only function in intracellular processes? Anybody? Correct. It also functions in intercellular processes or outside the cell, such as its function in signaling cells to power up reactions. Here's a fun fact. ATP is part of your genetic material too. During RNA synthesis, ATP is actually used as one of the nucleotides. For DNA, ATP first turns into DATP, then becomes part of your genetic blueprint. So your energy molecule isn't just powering the cell, it's also writing instructions for life. ATP is the middleman in metabolism, linking energy gain and energy use. When your body breaks down food, energy is released and stored in ATP. That same ATP is then used to build and repair your body from growing new cells to strong nutrients. It's like your cell's energy budget manager, making sure energy flows when it's needed the most. And of course, ATP makes movement possible, inside and out. In your muscles, ATP binds to myosin, allowing it to pull on actin filaments. This is what causes contraction. Every inside cells, ATP powers motor proteins that carry stuff around, like tiny delivery trucks on the go. Without ATP, nothing would move. Not your limbs, not your heartbeat, not even molecules inside your cells. Well, learning checkpoint for everybody. What would happen to a cell if ATP production suddenly stopped? Correct. The cell would not be able to perform many of its essential functions as ATP is its energy currency that powers up the processes. Now, can you recall a few samples of function of ATP? Correct. We have energy transfer, biosynthesis, cell signaling, nucleic acid synthesis, metabolism, and movement. So why does ATP matter? ATP powers chemical reactions. It builds vital molecules. It signals between and inside the cells. It connects catabolism and anabolism in metabolism. And it moves muscles and molecules alike. That's why we call ATP the energy currency of the cell. Because without it, life wouldn't run, not even a little. Now, we're at the end of our discussion about adenosine triphosphate. Let's look back at our learning outcomes to see if we have achieved these. First, explain how the structure of ATP makes it an effective energy carrier in cells. Exactly. We've talked about how ATP is made up of an adenine base, a ribose sugar, and triphosphate groups, and how it supplies energy to biological processes when it is hydrolyzed, as it produces ADP, inorganic phosphate, and energy. Next, for the class, can anybody compare the three main ways cells produce ATP and describe when each process happens? Can you please compare the three ways? Right, we've gone through the three main ways cells produce ATP. First, substrate level phosphorylation is simple and anaerobic, producing ATP directly from high energy substrates during glycolysis and Krebs cycle. Oxidative phosphorylation is more efficient, producing the most ATP in aerobic respiration through electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. Finally, photophosphorylation happens in plants and some bacteria using light energy to generate ATP during photosynthesis. Lastly, for the class, give examples of how ATP is used in different cellular activities and explain why it is called energy currency of the cell. Can you please give me some examples? And again, you are correct. So we have energy transfer, biosynthesis, cell signaling, nucleic acid synthesis, metabolism, and movement. In conclusion, ATP is indispensable to life, acting as the universal energy currency that powers cellular processes, signaling, and biosynthesis. Its unique structure, high energy bonds, and efficient regeneration make it central to metabolism and survival in all living organisms. Understanding ATP allows us to appreciate how cells manage and distribute energy to sustain life. I hope you learned a lot from our discussion about ATP, its structure, how it is synthesized, and how it functions. I prepared an evaluation for you to test your knowledge and skills about ATP, and you may scan the QR code provided on the screen, and after answering, you may also see your test results immediately. Thank you for listening, and Sir Errol out.